Have you ever noticed how the loudest people aren't always the most prepared? How those who shout their certainties with the most force are usually the ones who've studied the least? In this video, we're going to dive into one of the most fascinating and disturbing psychological phenomena of the human mind, the Dunning-Kruger Effect. You'll discover why ignorance often comes disguised as confidence, why true sages doubt themselves so much, and most importantly, how to recognize this pattern in your own life. Get ready to question everything you thought you knew about knowing. There's an uncomfortable truth waiting for you. Right this moment, you're probably wrong about something important. Maybe about your driving skills, or about how much you really understand politics, or about your competence at work. And what's most disturbing, the areas where you're most mistaken are exactly those where you're most certain you're right. There's a silent enemy living inside your mind. It makes no noise, leaves no traces, but it transforms ignorance into arrogance and makes you believe you're the protagonist of a story you might not even understand properly. This enemy has a name: the Dunning-Kruger Effect, a psychological phenomenon that reveals something terrifying about human nature. The less we know, the more we believe we know. The more we know, the more we perceive the abyss of our own ignorance. If you want to understand how to avoid this mental trap, subscribe to the channel, like it, and activate the bell. Let's join you on this journey of self-discovery that can completely change the way you see the world and yourself. Pittsburgh, 1995. A man named MacArthur Wheeler walks through the streets in broad daylight. His face is uncovered. No mask, no disguise, no caution. He enters two banks and robs them, smiles at the security cameras. He's not nervous. He's absolutely confident. Hours later, the police arrest him. The camera footage is crystal clear. His identity, obvious. When they show Wheeler the recordings, he doesn't get angry. He gets confused, genuinely shocked. "But I used the lemon juice," he says, perplexed. Wheeler believed that rubbing lemon juice on his face would make him invisible to cameras. His logic was simple. Lemon works as invisible ink on paper. Therefore, it must work with cameras too. He even tested it before the crime. Took a photo of himself and apparently couldn't see himself. Maybe the film was old or the camera poorly adjusted. But Wheeler interpreted it as confirmation. This story reached the ears of David Dunning, a psychology professor at Cornell. And one question tormented him: how can someone be so wrong and still so certain they're right? Dunning joined forces with his student, Justin Kruger. Together, they created a series of experiments to test a frightening hypothesis. What if incompetence not only prevents us from getting things right, but also blinds us to our own mistakes? They recruited participants and administered tests on logic, grammar, and sense of humor. Then they asked each person to evaluate their own performance. The result was shocking. The worst performances came accompanied by the greatest self-confidence. The people who made the most mistakes thought they had done better. It wasn't false modesty, it was genuine belief. The best participants, on the other hand, underestimated their results. They thought everyone had done as well as they had. It was scientific confirmation of something philosopher Bertrand Russell had said decades before. The trouble with the world is that the stupid are cocksure, while the intelligent are full of doubt. And Socrates, more than 2,000 years ago, had already proclaimed, "I know that I know nothing." True wisdom begins when we recognize the limits of our own knowledge. Imagine a graph. On the horizontal axis, how much you actually know about a subject. On the vertical axis, how much you think you know. At the beginning of the curve, something extraordinary happens. You've barely started learning, but your confidence skyrockets vertically. This peak has a name: Mount Stupid. It's the point where ignorance is so profound it gets confused with enlightenment. This is where WhatsApp experts are born, weekend gurus, those who read a headline and became epidemiologists. This phenomenon isn't new. In ancient Greece, the sophists sold superficial knowledge as if it were profound wisdom. and Plato criticized them fiercely for it. On Mount Stupid, the person doesn't realize they're on a fragile peak, built on nothing. They look around and think they've already reached the mountaintop. But then something happens. You keep studying. You go beyond the superficial. And suddenly you realize the subject is infinitely more complex than you imagined. That's when you plummet into the valley of despair. The moment when you begin to see the real size of what you don't know. It's painful, humiliating, but it's also the birth of true wisdom. From this valley, a new ascent begins, the slope of enlightenment. Your confidence returns, but now with real foundation. You master the topic, but never again with the arrogance of the beginning, because now you know what you don't know, and that changes everything. Have you noticed? In meetings, debates, family dinners, whoever speaks loudest almost never has the most to say. The room fills with firm opinions, certain diagnoses, simple solutions to complex problems, and almost always, the one who raises their voice with the most conviction is the one who studied least, reflected least, doubted least. This isn't coincidence. It's the Dunning-Kruger Effect in action. The person who knows little has no way to perceive how little they know. They lack precisely the ability to recognize their own ignorance. And since they don't see their mistakes, they believe they're right, that they have reason, that others don't understand. Meanwhile, the most prepared hesitate, they weigh each word. They know the world is too complex for easy answers. And because of this, they often stay silent. In practice, this means we're frequently guided by the most confident, not the most competent. We follow whoever shouts loudest, not whoever thinks best. On social media, this amplifies. The algorithm favors certainties, not questions. The extreme, the absolute, the simplified. Result: millions of voices but few ideas. Much noise, little listening. And a dangerous illusion that knowing is just appearing to know. There's a paradox at the heart of knowledge. The more you learn, the more you perceive the ocean of things you still don't know. It's like lighting a flashlight in the dark and discovering that the darkness extends far beyond what you imagined. True experts live surrounded by questions. Doubt for them isn't weakness. It's a lighthouse that guides them. This has a name: epistemic modesty. The humility to recognize the limits of one's own knowledge. Thinkers like Montaigne dedicated entire works to the art of doubting. "What do I know?" was his constant question. He understood that wisdom isn't in accumulating certainties, but in continuously questioning. But there's a price. When you see clearly, you perceive the size of the challenge, and this generates hesitation. In today's world, hesitating is seen as weakness. So many brilliant professionals stay silent. They think their competence is common, that everyone knows what they know. It's what studies call false consensus. Meanwhile, those on Mount Stupid continue giving lectures, forming opinions, without knowing that they don't know. And this silence of the wise opens space for the noise of superficiality. We live in a paradoxical moment. We've never had so much access to information, and we've never been so vulnerable to misinformation. The excess of data without structure, without depth, generates only an illusion of knowing. It's the age of, "I read an article and became an expert," of "I watched a video and now I teach," of "I don't trust science, I trust my instinct." German philosopher Hegel already warned about this in the 19th century. Knowledge without critical reflection is dangerous. Absorbing information isn't the same as understanding, and understanding requires time, effort, and above all, willingness to question one's own knowledge. But on the internet, there's no incentive for this. Platform logic rewards those with quick answers, not those with deep questions. And so, the Dunning-Kruger phenomenon spreads like never before. Each of us can become an instant expert on any subject. All it takes is a bit of confidence, and a lot of ignorance about one's own ignorance. But there's hope. There's a rare and transformative moment in a person's life, that moment when they realize they don't know as much as they thought. It's not easy to get there. It requires courage to look in the mirror and see the cracks in one's own knowledge. This moment is the beginning of metacognition, the ability to think about one's own thinking, to observe one's certainties with distrust, to ask, am I seeing everything, or just what I want to see? Metacognition is the natural antidote to the Dunning-Kruger effect. It doesn't prevent us from making mistakes, but it gives us the chance to perceive the mistake, to adjust course, to learn how to cultivate it. Active humility. Knowing we're fallible isn't enough. We must want to learn, seek feedback, listen more than we speak. True curiosity. Not the kind that seeks to confirm what we already believe, but the kind that's enchanted by the unknown. Exposure to difference. Surrounding ourselves only with those who think like us is comfortable and dangerous. Respectful confrontation with other views expands consciousness. And finally, time for silence. The world screams for quick answers, but wisdom requires pause. The good news is this: when an incompetent person truly begins to learn, they don't just improve their performance, they also begin to recognize their failures. They stop being victims of the Dunning-Kruger effect, not because they came to know everything, but because they finally understood that knowing is a journey, not a destination. And it's at this point that true intelligence begins, the kind that needs no stage or applause, the kind that's capable of saying with serenity, I don't know, but I want to know. MacArthur Wheeler rubbed lemon juice on his face thinking it would make him invisible. We've all, in a way, rubbed our own lemon juice at some point in life, thinking we knew more than we actually knew. The question isn't whether you've fallen into this trap. The question is, are you capable of recognizing when you're in it? Because the first step to getting off Mount Stupid is realizing you're there. And that, in itself, is already wisdom. The world needs fewer shouted certainties and more whispered doubts, less arrogance and more humility, fewer people who think they know everything and more people willing to admit they're always learning. We don't need to be perfect. We need to be conscious. And this consciousness, this awakening to the limits of one's own knowledge, is what makes us truly human. If this video made you reflect, share it with someone who needs to hear this. Subscribe to the channel for more content that expands the mind. And tell me in the comments, in which area of your life have you caught yourself on Mount Stupid? Let's talk. See you next time.